Hello YouTube and welcome back to my channel. I really don't know how to start this video. I guess I should start off by explaining why I'm shooting on my webcam. I have my camera, but I left my tripod at my vacation house over the summer and I still haven't had it shipped to me yet. And also I don't really know where I want to film videos yet. I haven't decided. But essentially what I'm talking about in this video today is my history with anxiety disorder, and y'all have no clue how long I've been wanting to make a video about this, but I could just never decide the best way to talk about it that would be most effective and most helpful to people. My mindset was very set on the video being perfect, but that ended up being that I never got around to making it. So I figured I'd make it now because it was a topic of conversation throughout the day today, so my mind's on it, and my mind's good for talking about it, so I figured I would. I'm currently, or just was, having a conversation with my best friend about this, and we're basically talking about how today's age in society is very medicated, and we actually are not learning about this, but discussing this intermittently in my psych class. In America and Western culture, a lot of what we do with people is we try to diagnose them as opposed to just straight up helping them. You just want to stick them in a category and send them on their way. And for the pharmaceutical industry, that's probably the route that makes them the most money. It leaves us growing up believing that medication solves problems, and that's not true at all. Medication can very much help and aid people who are struggling with very debilitating thought and mood disorders, but it doesn't necessarily solve it. It just makes it a lot easier to function in day-to-day life. But I think that if people do decide to take meds, that they should also be working naturally, perhaps with, I don't know, I don't really trust therapists, but perhaps with a therapist or other natural healthy ways to overcome their problems. And I think that can also depend on the degree of the problem with which one is dealing, but I think for a lot of cases, mainly with what I've been through, which is anxiety and sort of borderline depression, I think that's probably the best bet. So, I guess I should backstory this, right? I did, some people might know a little bit about this, a very small portion, because I've talked about it before for my senior speech during the year. So I talked about my anxiety in front of the school, but it was a very, very condensed version of what I actually went through, and the long version is a lot harder to explain. So in the past, when do I want to say that it started? I think I would say end of middle school, beginning of high school, because of the social situations I was in school and stuff. I developed very severe anxiety, and I started to have borderline depressive tendencies, some obsessive compulsive tendencies, even though I was never diagnosed with any of that. But if you've struggled with something, genuinely struggled with something, you just kind of know that you have. It got a bit better when I started online schooling, but right when I started online schooling, I say, is when it was kind of at its forefront, at its worst. I know that a lot of people associate anxiety, it's all in your head, you're making it up. And honestly, when anxiety rears its head, it manifests itself physically in the people that it affects. It stems from your brain, obviously, because your brain is connected to your nervous system, your limbic system, your everything else. But it can be a very, very physically debilitating thing at its worst, especially with panic attacks, and when it just really comes to a forefront and everyone can very clearly see that it's just badly affecting you. Basically, what happens with people with bad anxiety is that their sympathetic nervous system is kind of on overdrive. Your sympathetic nervous system controls your fight or flight response. So you're just kind of on overdrive. You're always in the mindset that there's something to fear, and that fear becomes attached to life around you. And triggered. I know that's a meme now. It's a meme, but I'm gonna have to use this word because it's the only word I can really use to describe it. Like, it's a real thing. So if certain locations or certain things that you've dealt with in the past have this like connotation within your brain to be negative or to be something that brings about fear within you, they can continue to trigger you like many, many years into the future. Like, even though I wouldn't consider myself someone who currently struggles with severe anxiety, there are definitely situations that I'll put myself in that remind me of just how bad it was at one point. These situations include like getting up in front of a lot of people, and plenty of people in the world have stage fright, but I've been known to have panic attacks in front of people before, especially people I know. I can almost like easily get up in front of strangers, but when it's in front of people I know and people that, I don't know, have some form of expectation of me, it's worse. I'll start getting like really shaky and trembly, and my mind just kind of goes blank, and all I can think about is like not being in that situation anymore. And it's kind of improved over time, but like I definitely still feel it, like especially with like auditions, public speaking, and things where you can't really avoid being in front of people. For the most part, I don't really like reserve myself around people. I'm just kind of like, I am who I am, and I'm going to act the way I act kind of all the time. But I definitely still get nervous in those situations. I wanted to read an excerpt because, so the speech I made this year about anxiety, when I originally wrote that, like the very beginnings of what that was based off of, it wasn't my speech. It was just me writing about my anxiety as a sort of cathartic way of starting to move past it. So when I originally wrote it, it was 7 pages long, and it documented in lots more detail my experience with anxiety, and that's what I named it. And I sort of wrote it more to help myself, but also in case it could help others, and I didn't really know how I wanted to do that, but I sent it to my mom sent it to my aunts, and they all agreed that it helped them understand not only things that they had noticed within themselves anxiety-wise before, but things that they would have never guessed about me. I'm opening it on Google Docs. I want to read an excerpt because I haven't experienced a panic attack in a very long time, and I feel like it would be better to read from this so that you understand. Okay, so a panic attack by definition is a sudden feeling of acute or disabling anxiety. And I wrote, open quotes, "One of the scariest parts of anxiety is when it physically manifests itself, panic attacks. You never know when they're coming, and the only way I can describe one is pure hell. Once it hits, it's like nothing but dread is consuming your mind. I know when I'm starting to panic because I can't breathe. My head gets uncomfortably hot, and if it's really bad, I'll start shaking. All I can think about is getting away from wherever I am, whatever is making me anxious. Somewhere where I can hopefully breathe, calm myself down, and recompose myself. Most of my panic attacks I forget about because I try to push the memories of them away, but there's one I remember vividly because it's the first one I had in public. Oh, this is where I start talking about one of the main panic attacks I had, which was in a hair salon the day of my freshman prom. And I was like getting my hair straightened, and I was worrying about it being perfect because my my freshman class was very, very not nice and supportive to me as a person. So I was very, very self-conscious, and I wanted to impress people, and I was very, very worried about being perfect. Perfectionism is what I was worried about. And it seems so small and minuscule a thing to get that worked up over, but that's what anxiety is. It takes small things and blows them out of proportion in your mind to the point where your body starts responding as if it was a bigger problem than it actually is. It's a very, very mental thing, but very physical at the same time. Another fun fact about anxiety, it feeds off of itself. Once I had a really bad panic attack in the middle of Target, so from that day forward, every time I'd go into Target, I would be so anxious that I would have a panic attack, and my fear would induce the panic attack itself. So panic attacks literally cause panic attacks. Anxiety can also stem into other mental illnesses such as OCD and depression. That's another thing with the whole trigger thing. So I can be completely fine now, but if I put myself back in a situation that in the past has brought about anxiety, it's like my mind begins reliving how I felt at that time, and I'll start to feel the same way I did at that time. It's a very, very complex thing. But the main reason I wanted to give you this like background info, so that I can talk about like what I did to help with it. Because I think that's the better, more positive, helpful part of this video. I do want to talk about one other thing about it stemming into other things. So when I had very, very severe anxiety, it manifested itself in different ways that just brought about people making fun of me even more, which was I had like an eye twitch. I had sort of compulsive tendencies, like obsessive compulsive tendencies. I would literally just be sitting in my bed and compulsively feel the need to get up and wash my hands like every maybe 15 minutes because compulsive tendencies become a habit because you associate them with like easing your ongoing mental turmoil. So at the same time you feel like you're soothing yourself, you're really just feeding the habit, and it's just gonna get worse. So I had that. I had another compulsive habit was like sniffing my hands, and I still notice myself doing that sometimes. Tearing at my hair, like ripping it apart. And I've known multiple people that do that when they're nervous, that they literally just like either like pull their hair out of their head like physically, or they'll just like rip it apart. So those were the main things I dealt with as far as that goes. So how did this get better? One of the main things that helped was moving for me, moving myself out of that situation and into a new one where I had more opportunities to improve upon myself and meet new people that perhaps would be better for me and my mental state. Basically, the trend in how I began to overcome this was stepping out of my comfort zone and literally facing my fears as head on as I possibly could. Because when you start to face the things that scare you, they slowly become less scary and more normal, and you start to realize that maybe you were freaking out when you shouldn't have been freaking out. It started to improve throughout 10th grade and 11th grade, but it didn't really get better until senior year. And the main reason for that is because of the resolution I made this New Year's, as stupid as it sounds. My resolution was based upon overcoming my anxiety. So what I did is I took the quote, do one thing every day that scares you, and I actually applied it to my life. I made it like a task for myself to do one thing every single day that struck anxiety in me or made me nervous or that literally scared me. And I made a list on my phone, 1 through however many days I went. I don't know how many it was. And I tried to stick to it every day. And I would write down the one thing I did every day. That was the best thing I could do for myself. Some of them are small things. Like, I didn't make it so that it had to be a big thing every day. It was just little things, like driving. Driving gives me so much anxiety, but I would, like, drive places, and I would talk to people that I was nervous around. And then January 17th was the day I wrote about my anxiety. And if you know anything about anxiety and have struggled with it, you understand that talking about it can make it worse. As much as it's cathartic, at the same time it triggers it. It brings up the memories of everything you've gone through, and it can put you into that state again. It was definitely quite a challenge to write about it, but obviously I'm glad I did. It majorly affected me in the end. There's just like little things like volunteered to do for like theater things. I volunteered to do in class. And I didn't continue writing stuff down every day. Like, I mainly physically wrote it down in January. But this just got me into the mindset that I should be working to overcome things. I would always like ask my my family, like, should I be like medicated for things? Like, would that help me? Because like, I honestly don't feel like things are gonna get better. But I think that a lot of times people can medicate themselves either self-medicate themselves or actually like get diagnosed with something and use it to run away from what they're dealing with. Although what they're dealing with can be awful, I think that people should really, really work to try and confront it themselves, because it really, really helps you grow as a person. And I would say that my second semester of senior year helped me grow as a person as far as my anxiety went. I mean, my speech, I spoke in front of the entire school, and to this day I cite it as one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, because although I was terrified, it was my worst nightmare from the day I got to the school and sat down and realized this was something I was going to have to do. That was probably my worst fear of high school. It ended up being amazing because once I had gotten up in front of all those people and like laid out what I considered at the time dirty laundry and like described like a very, very personal thing to me, it didn't really matter what they thought at that point, and I was just kind of free. And I would definitely say that 2016 has been a year of me freeing myself, and a lot of that has been pushing myself to overcome my fears and grabbing life by the balls. As far as the end of my senior year, that helped me a lot to overcome my anxiety, and then this past summer helped me a lot to just grow as a person in general, because I had a better like idea of myself and better sense of self. I could really reflect and like decide what I needed to better within myself. I think focusing on yourself is a very, very important thing for people to do. I think a lot of times people elect to put themselves in social situations and like do all this stuff so that they don't have to focus on themselves as people, and they really like heavily rely on others because they don't feel like they can rely on themselves. This summer was one where I elected to focus on becoming more independent and becoming a better version of myself, because all we really have is ourselves. Like, we have our family and we have like those who are close to us, but we really have ourselves. Like, at the end of the night, we are here with ourselves and our own thoughts and how we are as a person. So I think that we should try to work so that we can be proud of who we are. I think that looking at life like this can not only help people like that struggle with this, but also people that don't and just want to see growth in themselves. I think that this can be very, very beneficial to many different people. And that's why I made this video. So I tried to explain this to the best of my ability. I hope that it was helpful to some people. Perhaps in the future it's something that I might be able to expand on more, or expand on different things, maybe even things I haven't gone through, just things that I happen to have experience with as far as other people or have been educated upon. I'll have to see. But anyway, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so that I know that you like this video and I can continue in the future to make more videos like it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video.